Now, the conclusion.
The series has drawn favourable comparisons to other great shows that were around at this time, with Batman the Animated Series and the X-Men being regularly mentioned. The latter for me definitely had similarities. On one hand, you had Goliath and Professor Charles Xavier, who both think that whilst there are bad humans, that humans and mutants, or humans and gargoyles, can work together and exist peacefully. On the other hand, you had both Demona and Magneto, who believe all humans are evil and they cannot coexist with their kind, and they are the next step in evolution. So you have that as a good play on similarities. The X-Men also had to deal with being hunted down by angry, hating mobs. The Gargoyles had to deal with a similar fate, especially during the latter stages of Season 2 during the 3-part episode Hunter's Moon, when the Gargoyles are exposed to the public and are stoked by feelings of fear and hate, and they wind up getting hunted down with the police in tow, until they are rescued by their long-term enemy turned ally in Xanatos. So both shows shared similarities in terms of dealing with bigotry, being different, and acceptance. Season 3 of the Gargoyles was known as the Goliath Chronicles, and has an ongoing story arc of the Gargoyles having to deal with human prejudice and hate. But in the final episode, a successful rescue of trapped passengers on the train sees them lauded as heroes and finally being accepted. This, however, was not considered to be part of the Gargoyles story continuity, and here's why. During my research on the subject, I found out that the third season, the Goliath Chronicles, was not considered canon. So with the exception of the first episode of Season 3, the rest of the season is persona non grata, as explicitly stated by the series creator Greg Weisman. All the producers, the story editors, including Weisman himself, along with most of the other crew, were replaced, and this was due to US network ABC, on which Gargoyles was airing on Saturday afternoons, being acquired by Disney. What you had with the new replacements was a new team that had very little time to familiarize themselves with seasons 1 and 2 of the show before they began production. This severely hindered their efforts. As a result, the following 12 episodes were poorly received by most of the fans for various reasons, including poor characterization and continuity. But even more surprising for me was the writers who came in for the Goliath Chronicles had written multiple episodes of the X-Men, which is why the storylines feel similar in terms of dealing with human prejudice. And on a personal level, I actually enjoyed Season 3 of Gargoyles, and given the success of the X-Men, it is very surprising to me that this season gets negative reviews. I personally felt the stories were very well told, and they maintained the same dark, mature storytelling from the first 2 seasons. I will say, however, I did feel that the last episode, as much as I enjoyed it, felt a little premature in terms of ending on such a positive note, and people's hatred of the Gargoyles turning into acceptance rather quickly. And when I saw that that was the final episode of Gargoyles as a whole, I felt that there could have been a whole other batch of stories to be told. Also, the Gargoyles antagonist from the first 2 seasons, Xanatos, watching it back now, it is incredible that after all he did, he came out as an out-and-out good guy. After all his schemes, it is incredible that he had such a complete turnaround, and not once did he fall back into his old ways. Except for episode 10 of Goliath Chronicles, for who it may come true, when Goliath awakens in an alternate reality, where he is human, and Xanatos is the villain as we once knew him from the last 2 seasons. It is the only time during the Goliath Chronicles season where we see him as his former dubious self. Now, I can see why that would be an issue with some people, as a leopard never changes its spots, and it probably could have made for more intriguing stories if he had gained their trust over a period of time before betraying the Gargoyles again. Now, there was a comic book series from an independent comic book publisher named Slave Labor Graphics that carried on the adventures of Gargoyles with Weisman, the story editor. The series carried on after the events of Season 2, with Goliath Chronicles being completely ignored. It lasted from 2006 to 2009. There had been plans for a renewal of the license, but unfortunately Disney executives had raised the cost of the licensing fee, and this was considered too expensive for SLG, and as a result, there was no continuation of this comic book series. In 2022, a new publisher named Dynamite Entertainment would begin publishing new Gargoyles comics, and these would be canon, and they would follow the events of the first 2 seasons of the show, as well as the comic books and all of their spin-offs. Amazing facts that I only just discovered whilst doing my research on the show. Again, personally, I enjoyed Season 3 Goliath Chronicles, and whilst I can understand the criticisms of the show given the change of staff for the show, I still think the stories were very entertaining and very well written. I had never read the comic books on Gargoyles, but after this little foray into this world, it is something I will definitely be looking to read up on. As I have stated several times now in previous videos, one of my favourite aspects of successful animated shows is the voice acting. At the head of this group is actor Keith David. His amazing tones give Goliath that larger than life presence and gravitas. Goliath can be kind and caring and equally angry and volatile depending on the situation he's in which Keith voices to perfection. For me, he is to Goliath what Peter Cullen was to Optimus Prime. If there was to be another animated show, now barring unforeseen circumstances, surely they have to get Keith to reprise his role. Actress Sally Richardson Whitfield voices Detective Elisa Maza. She gives her that tough, gutsy, take no prisoners vibe while meshed with great femininity and care. She has great chemistry with Keith David as they portray the romance between Goliath and Elisa. On top of her voiceover roles, Richardson has had a successful on-screen career with roles in films like A Low Down Dirty Shame, I Am Legend, and Black Dynamite. Veteran voice actor Jeff Bennett has an incredible resume of voice characters going back to the early 90s, 1991 to be precise. So he is a very prolific voiceover legend in his genre. He provides the voices of not just his main character Brooklyn, but also the voices of the Magus, Owen Burnett, showing off his incredible range and providing a pseudo New York accent for Brooklyn. Given the name, you can appreciate the irony. He gives Brooklyn that tough, stubborn, sensitive but caring vibe. Personally, of the little trio of Brooklyn, Lexington and Broadway, he's my favourite. The late veteran actor Ed Asner, who was also a presence in the voiceover world, provides the voice of Hudson, giving him that veteran style execution of the character. He was a regular couch potato who loved TV when there was no action, but there was also a very wise old veteran who could advise the younger gargoyles and their leader Goliath should the need arise. Bill Fagerback, I hope I pronounced that correctly, voiced Broadway on the show and gave that sound of at times a clumsy but caring gargoyle who was loyal to a fault but had a nasty angry side to him when he was provoked. Bill has many voiceover credits to his name, including Patrick Star in the SpongeBob cartoon series. Tom Addox Hernandez does the voice of Lexington and gives him an almost childlike youth vibe with how his voice is executed. The resident genius of the Gargoyles, his portrayal for me reminds me of Barry Gordon's portrayal of Donatello in the original TMNT 87 show. Hernandez has many credits to his name, including a small role in Under Siege 2, and in voiceover roles he was in Spectacular Spider-Man and Young Justice. Bridget Bacco. She is the voice of Angela on the show, and I must admit, other than Gargoyles, I'm really not familiar at all with her work, other than what I could find online. She does an excellent job of portraying Angela, showing that stubbornness towards her father Goliath of wanting his acceptance, her naivety, frustrations and disappointment towards her mother Demona, her kind and caring nature towards the trio, especially Broadway, who ends up becoming her boyfriend. Bronx is portrayed by the voice god himself, Frank Welker. I mean, all you have to do is go on IMDb, or Behind the Voices, or do a Google search and look at his body of work, which is just simply outstanding. Any cartoon you watched in the 70s up until modern times, you have definitely heard this man's voice. All he does for Brooklyn is make growling dog noises and sounds, but he does it to perfection. There is no other voice actor quite like Frank Welker. On top of the main actors, you also had 2 regulars who were synonymous with the Star Trek franchise. Marina Sirtis voices Demona, and Jonathan Frakes voices Xanatos. Marina's portrayal of Demona is fantastic. Now, if you watched her on Star Trek Next Generation, she was caring but a strong personality full of pure goodness in her heart. Demona is the complete opposite, a completely hateful and vindictive personality whose sole purpose in life is the utter destruction of humanity. And Marina plays it very well, giving Demona that believability of a villain that will do whatever it takes to accomplish her goals, even if it means turning on her loved ones. Jonathan Frakes as Xanatos is suave, charming, conniving and deceitful. He plays up all these traits very well. His portrayal has you loving to hate David Xanatos, with you wanting to know what devious plan he has next. He's one of my favourite animated villains of all time. I mentioned Star Trek earlier. Well, this show was full of guest stars from the Star Trek franchise, which included Frakes and Marina's co-stars from Star Trek Next Generation, LeVar Burton, Michael Dorn, and Brent Spiner. But they weren't the only guest stars from Star Trek lore, as Star Trek Deep Space Nine's Avery Brooks appears on the show, along with Cole Meany, who played Chief O'Brien. Late actress the legendary Michelle Nichols, known as Uhura from the original Star Trek, also appears. Finishing off the Star Trek connection is Star Trek Voyager's Kate Mulgrew. I mean, you'd think it was more than a coincidence with this connection. However, Greg Weisman, the producer, insists that it was completely unintentional. Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis were instrumental in talking to their Next Generation co-stars to participate on the show. There was apparently almost a role for Patrick Stewart, but the show's makers could not come to terms on money. With all this crossover, they may as well have done a Star Trek style episode as a nod to the franchise. Now I have covered quite some ground on Gargoyles, and I don't even think I've begun to scratch the surface. I discovered so much about the Gargoyles that I'd love to discuss, but as I've gone on for quite a bit, what I will do, make a follow-up video down the line discussing my favourite episodes from the series and delve further into the Gargoyles universe with other characters. Now, to bring things to a close, I would like to state what an amazing show this was. Having the Gargoyles start off in ancient Scotland and end up all the way in modern day Manhattan, enduring the hardships of being protectors in ancient times and having to deal with betrayal, living in a new strange world and adjusting to the surroundings and dealing with a whole new set of problems that the modern world brought. At their core, the Gargoyles were a family, and they sought to protect their own in addition to protecting their castle. Meeting so many different characters along the way, some who would be their allies and others were deadly enemies. A nice blend of sorcery, magic, technology, along with all the action, it gave the show an incredible depth and made it more than just a standard action-adventure show. The dark tone, the complex story arcs and the melodrama were top-notch. The voice acting was also brilliantly executed and really put Gargoyles on the map as one of those great 1990s animated shows. There have been murmurings about a live-action movie, harkening back to when the show was first on the air, with series editor Greg Weisman and writer Michael Reeves penning a film adaptation of the 5-part story intro Awakening. This was ultimately rejected and nothing has materialized ever since. There has, however, been confirmation from Disney announcing on October 2023 that a reboot series of Gargoyles is officially in the works. Now, if they can draw inspiration from the original series as well as the follow-ups in the comic, we could be on to a real winner here. So let's see how this ends up. Overall, an absolute legend of a TV animated show. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and if you want to see more, please remember to like, share and subscribe. Thank you.